Hi everyone, my name's PK and here I have Vijay Agarwal, who has bought two properties in Australia. He lives in Singapore, and he's done this without catching a single flight to Australia. He's done this without using any buyer's agents, without sacrificing the due diligence on the ground. He's used data and the right team to buy highly yielding, high growth properties. And in this next 10, 20 minutes, I'll be asking Vijay, with his permission, questions like why he wanted to invest in Australia in the first place from abroad, how he did it without catching a flight, how he built his confidence in investing in a completely different country, and some of the mechanics around the data. And hopefully it will bring everyone a ton of value. Smash the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and stick around right till the end, because you don't really get content from the horse's mouth, so to speak, anywhere else. So once again, Vijay, congratulations. And I know we were already talking. Thank you so much again for making time.
Thanks, VK. Thanks so much for having me this afternoon.
Maybe we'll just start from the start. You were mentioning before how you got your PR, I think, in Australia. Like, what kind of impelled you to look beyond Singapore, and why did you choose Australia to invest?
Yeah, so PK, when I got my Australian PR, having stayed in Singapore for the last 12 years, it's not easy to convert a PR into a citizenship, and that's the reason I got my Australian PR. So when I got that, I started researching more about the country and how, especially the Indian community staying in Australia. Somehow, your videos start popping up, without me looking for anything on the real estate side in Australia, and I started going through those initial videos and client testimonials, client videos, and that kind of kindle a bit of an interest, as to what sort of trajectory it may be, if one goes through buying properties in a country like Australia, looking at yields ranging from 5 to 5.5% early this year when interest rates were still low. I thought it might be a good bet to kind of diversify, because in terms of real estate, I only have a small property in India and one in Singapore, and bulk of it is in, I would say, stocks, bonds, and maybe just plain vanilla fixed deposit, which doesn't need much in this kind of an environment. So I wanted to enroll for your course, but I would say, to be honest, the fee, which was $6,000 back then, was not very cheap, and I did knew, whether it would deliver value for me. So I was in two minds. Then I ended up calling Shyam, who is one of your existing group member. I spoke to him like for 15-20 minutes, and he said, just go ahead. I think you will realize the value after you have bought a couple of initial properties. So I just kind of took a leap of faith and ended up joining your course. First 4 5 weeks, I already started making offers without finishing the last module of your course. The first couple of, I would say, offers I made, I was a bit conservative while making those offers. I thought maybe the market is not that hot, but it turned out to be otherwise. So I changed my strategy a bit. I started making, I would say, a bit more informal relationships with some of those property sales managers, and ended up, I would say, buying two properties in the first 2.5 months itself in Perth.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point as well, because I just did a video on this. I think from the outside, without being a quote unquote expert, it's very easy to think that the property market is sliding with interest rates going up and everything in the world, that Australian real estate is very soft. But when you start making offers, especially in good suburbs, good markets, there's always markets within markets, as you said, you realize that actually it is a hot market in pockets, and that it's very easy to just put offer after offer, and next 2 3 months you don't even have a property. Like, that's how hot the market is in pockets. And that's a really good point that you make, that you do need to quickly pivot if you're like that, to be a little bit more aggressive, because the truth is, the media says one thing, on the ground reality in some areas may be a different thing. And you selected Perth. You got two properties in 2 months, like you said, Vijay. The first one was $510,000, and the rent will be likely about 580, so about a 5.9% yield. You got that about $25,000 under the comparable market value, which was a good outcome. And the second one I'm reading here was $420,000, once again in a different part of the city, the yield will be around 6%, so the rent will be somewhere around 485 or thereabouts. My question to you is like, what's your take? Of course, you followed the data which you learned in the system, but what's your take on Perth? Like sitting in Singapore, I mean, in one sense, you're closer to Perth than I am right now sitting in Brisbane. What's your take on the Perth economy? Everyone says that, it's highly exposed to mining, which it is, but it's diversifying. But what gave you the confidence to actually put your hard-earned money in there?
Yeah, so PK, when I was looking at property investing in Australia, I think Perth didn't came out naturally, as my first choice. As in, I didn't had any so-called preference for Perth. But when I was looking at data on some of the parameters, which I kind of keyed in, I was getting a lot of suburbs in Perth which popped up. Apart from that, there was few in, I would say, southern Australia and maybe some in Queensland. Uh, so when I was looking at Queensland, the whole saga on this land tax just came up around that point in time, which kind of dissuaded me not to look at Queensland as for my first property. And I didn't want to go regional for the first couple of properties. So I thought looking at a capital city makes sense. And if you look at Australia, I think at 400, 500K, buying a landed house, 500, 600, 700 square meter is unthinkable. I think in Perth, you can still do that.
Yeah.
So I think that gave me a bit of confidence that maybe Perth. And when I looked at the data for Perth between 98 and 2010, the property market really rallied. Properties which were worth 30, 40,000, they become 300, 400,000, almost 8 to 10 times. Some properties in the suburb which I looked at. So, but kind of the market was a bit cooler between 2010 until 2019, and then again it picked up post COVID. So I think I have strong and this is all data driven. Feeling that the Perth market might show one of the strongest growth in Australia as compared to other markets. Brisbane, of course, is one which people talk about Olympics and all. I'm not too sure about that, but yeah. So the price point, the entry point, at 400, $500,000, you're buying a huge landed house, and it is freehold. It's not even leasehold like the one I have in Singapore. So that gave me a bit of confidence. I have a couple of friends who are lawyers. They're all from Perth, so I do interact with them regularly. So having spoken to them gave me a bit of confidence that Perth would, in the next 5-10 years, would no longer be a mining town or a mining city. It has diversified, and there are talks of whether Perth can become the next Singapore. Whether it can become a financial hub. So in the same time, literally the same time zone and all. So things may happen in future. I think which was giving me a bit of confidence that yeah, the first couple of properties let me go for Perth, and the next 2 or 3 will be I'll kind of diversify across Southern Australia, Queensland.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I just don't see a world where in a few years' time or 5 years' time, you will be able to buy something under $500,000, even under $600,000, $700,000 in any major capital city in Australia, including Perth. And you made a really poignant remark where if you look at the data for Perth in the last 10 years, it's been a little bit helter-skelter. It's not been tremendously attractive, but that is quite myopic thinking. And you go back 20 years, 25, 30 years, you find that Perth performs just as well as any other place, including Sydney, Melbourne in Australia. So sometimes people, they get lost in short-termism and they fail to see the opportunity. And as you know, that one of the things that I teach in the course is a freebie for everyone, is that actually we want to find suburbs that are going to revert to the mean going forward. Statistically, they've been underperforming, not overperforming in the recent history. So that's I think something that is kind of subtle and people can miss it, but it's a very important point. And I just want to touch on, you mentioned data, again and again. Like, what is your profession? Like, what do you do in Singapore? And has that meant that you were able to learn my system, the course and the data easily? Or like, how do you marry those two things together, your own profession and your ability to take the course and execute upon it?
Yeah, so PK, I'm working with a European bank here in Singapore, and I'm working as a leverage finance professional, but I've not added leverage to my personal portfolio until recently. So I think when you grow up, in a typical average Indian middle class family, wherein uh, your family tend to, abhor any sort of leverage. Even for my personal property here, which I bought, I ended up, prepaying a large portion of that loan using equity a few years back, and now I realized that I could have used that equity in buying more properties. In fact, so despite being in the finance professional, working in banks, helping clients to kind of use leverage to add value. Personally, I didn't use leverage to add value to my personal portfolio, which I've started doing, after having, I would say, enrolled into your course. So I think I have uh, decent borrowing capacity still left. Yeah.
That's
So yeah, and numbers, I think I would say 70 to 80% of my time goes into looking at numbers and crunching them.
yeah,
So
sure.
that comes naturally.
Sure, sure. It is like even I have to remind myself to practice what I preach because you read the headlines these days and it's very easy to kind of go into a box, so to speak, and say, no, no, I'm going to keep my cash parked in the bank, even if it's eroding, because I just don't know what's happening with the world. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, but if you analyze history, never has that strategy actually worked for anyone, ever.
Definitely.
So yeah, sometimes we need to be a little bit brave. So good on you for doing that. And I think one thing that probably everyone wants to know is, you didn't use a buyer's agent. You didn't catch a Singapore Airlines flight over to Singapore, over to Perth from Singapore. How did you, how did you inspect the properties? Because we can't just go off the pictures online. How did you build confidence that structural fidelity and cosmetic outlook of the property was up to standard? You're going to now have tenants going into that property. How are you building the confidence to do all of that with bricks and mortar without ever having seen it?
Yeah, so PK, I think your course lays down a very excellent foundation in terms of helping the members out here to know how to build a team on ground without having actually met them, or So I started by getting a mortgage broker. I went with Jenny. She has been quite helpful. So that was the first step in the process, wherein I was trying to see whether as a Australian PR staying out of Australia, whether I can get a mortgage loan or not. That was the
Yeah.
first thing. So Jenny was quite quick, and she did assess that only CBA can do this. You don't have too many options. So I quickly went through that process, and after that, building, selecting your property manager who can go and kind of view properties for you when you're looking at it. So I think I used Rate My Agent, wherein I started shortlisting those agents, and then even before I asked them to go and do an inspection, I thought I'll make sure that their fee and all is something I'm willing to go ahead with. So I think your course did had all the ingredients which was required to put a team in place, and then having spoken to them on multiple counts, the inspection was done by them, and I was getting videos, or I would say pictures of that. And if a property is not up to the mark or standard, I would ask the property agent, sorry, the property manager, to advise me whether we should go or not. So before I picked up this Alexandra Height property, I think the PM inspected 5 or 6 other properties for me, of which like 3 or 4 had some issues. In terms of renovation expenses, it were on the higher side. She advised me not to kind of go ahead. Some of them even had issues, maybe on the roof and all, and she said it might have been painted. We don't know whether it's something is structural defect or not, so just avoid this. So I just went with their advice. So that's how kind of the property got inspected, and then I went ahead with making an offer with all the clauses as you have mentioned in your course. Knowing Western Australia, there were a few clauses which typically it doesn't work in those markets. So I kind of just went with what the market norms were, and when my offer was accepted, immediately got a building and pest inspection done. I think which came and the report came out quite clean, and had a call with the inspector, and he said that this is one of the best properties I've inspected in the recent past in this suburb. You may just want to do a termite installation a couple of years down the road, or immediately if you want. Other than that, there's no issue. So I think going through the process and just uh, kind of repeating that helped me put trust in the team actually, PK.
Yeah.
And the
That's good to hear.
community is wonderful. Just wanted to add that, apart from you or Samir responding to all our queries, I think that the team members or the people who are part of your group are very helpful. I have personally established connections with some of them on a personal basis now. We do keep exchanging thoughts and ideas, so I think that helps a lot, PK.
Yeah. And it's funny, I just got an email yesterday from a lady by the name of Gayatri, who's also from Singapore. So I feel that a lot of interest is kind of bubbling up, and a lot of people are wanting to invest in Australia from overseas because they see that places like Hong Kong and other places are maybe a little bit more affected by what's going on in the world, but Australia is still a little bit in its own bubble and a very stable political system, very wealthy country over the long term, and it was really very lucky, I would say.
You,
I
you,
guess. Sorry, go on.
One more thing I just wanted to add, PK. I think I would not have done something similar if I were to invest a property in any part of ASEAN or that for that matter in India. I think the legal structure is so clear in Australia. It's so transparent. You can just rely on a property manager to have keys to your house and just manage it on your behalf. I think one cannot do that in every part of the world, and it's very very clear. So I think that also gave me a lot of confidence that I don't need to be there in person. I don't need to have a friend or relative managing that property manager of the house. So I think which is why I think I just went ahead with that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I just went on a holiday to India. I just got back a few days ago, and I was talking to an uncle of mine, and he was saying a similar thing. He's like, "How do you manage so many properties?" And I said, "Well, property managers, right?" And I said, "Well, isn't that what you do?" I think he has like one or two. And he said, "No, like in India, that's not a concept at all.
Yeah,
You need to actually find, you can have a broker, they call them a broker, who finds a tenant, but the broker may not do a good job, and then you have to collect rent on a monthly basis. You need to do the maintenance, you need to deal with all the legal issues." And I just, when he was saying that, I was like, property investing is probably not worth it in my
it is.
risk tolerance in India,
It
but
is
in
not worth it
Australia.
because there is no way you can do a tenancy database check, because I'm getting those reports from my PM right now. And she has every detail, like, she knows how much those tenants are earning, when is this guy getting promotion, what has been his track record, bank balance, everything. I can't think of such a report even in a place like Singapore, PK, to be honest. I have not heard of that. Maybe because of data disclosure norm or whatever, I'm not sure. But
Mm.
in Singapore, you can't get those details of a tenant here. So
Yeah.
I think that also gave me a bit more confidence that at least I can filter out the wrong tenant, and have the right tenant in place.
Yeah, as much as we complain about government intervention into the property market, I think the regulatory system, as you said, the legal system is top notch here for property investors. Last question, Vijay. What would be like your best advice apart from, course related, separate, take out the course. What would be your best advice to someone perhaps in your shoes 3 or 4 months ago, someone who's like needing to diversify, perhaps get their money out of the bank, start earning a return on investment, hasn't really had much exposure to Australian real estate, is scared? I'm not sure if you were scared, but maybe they're scared about rising interest rates, what's going on with, a destabilized European economy. The war is still chugging along in Eastern Europe. Like a lot of things are going on, but you can't, you can't just keep your money under a mattress because in 10 years' time, it'll be worth probably a quarter of what it's worth now. What would be your advice to someone? And there's probably thousands of people who are going to watch this video in those shoes. What would be your recommendations to those people?
My simple recommendation to somebody who's looking at diversifying his or her investment portfolio is to have some real assets in that portfolio. Because in the long term, it will give you maybe better than stock returns. Uh, Property as an investment, comes with its own touch and feel, which you don't get when you invest in bonds and shares, and you have to constantly monitor the quarterly earnings to see, whether you should sell those stocks or not. So for somebody who's looking at investing in Australia, I think rather than trying to piece, multiple or scores of information which is available for free on internet, and just go about. Let's say one can say that you can buy a unit in Brisbane, but you don't know in which suburb of Brisbane you should be buying, and within that suburb where should you be buying. So I would suggest, strongly recommend and to go in for a course like PK's course. I'm not saying go in for PK's course, but absolutely, if you can afford, just go for that, as I did. But go through some formal education before you deploy your hard-earned money. Don't just go after a call being made by a sales agent because he or she will be trying to sell his portfolio and earn that commission. And when you're going through the course, or if you're equipped to do that yourself, make your decisions data driven rather than emotionally led. You may have friends or families telling you it's not the right time to invest, or all the negative news articles which keeps coming up on social media or newspapers. I think if you have a long-term view, at least 10, 15 years, 20 years, I think property investment in Australia would yield a decent return on your investment in the long term. And just be, convinced that this is going to work.
That's very reassuring. Be convinced that it's going to work. Yeah, I wish I had that advice when I first started. I would have gone much harder and much faster. No, thank you, Vijay. And yeah, look, Vijay, you've done really well. Congratulations on your 2 properties so far. Hopefully, it's just the start of the journey. You said you had borrowing capacity left. Under
Yes.
market value, high yield. They're doing well already. I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thanks so much, PK. Thank you for your time.
Hopefully everyone that's watching, you guys enjoyed it, especially if you're kind of, looking to invest outside your backyard. This is sort of gems and golden nuggets that Vijay shared that I think, aren't that known. They're almost like uncommon knowledge, but you don't need a buyer's agent. He bought internationally without catching a flight with complete confidence, as you can have heard yourself. So go do it, block out the noise, understand the data. Like I always say, the most important real estate is the 6 inches between your 2 ears, whether you use me or many of the hundreds of other providers of knowledge in Australia. The most important thing is the knowledge itself. My name's PK. Smash the subscribe button, and any questions, leave them below. I'll be happy to answer. Thanks so much, guys. Once again, thanks, Vijay.
Thank you, PK. Thank you.